The Stand by Stephen King. Panic and fear. Charlie's heart pounded like a drum, echoing the terror that once consumed him as a child. The room seemed to close in, the walls whispering the same crackling sounds that haunted his nightmares. "We have to get out of here now," he cried out, his voice a sharp note of panic. Sally, her brow furrowed in confusion, pressed for an answer. "What's wrong, Charlie? Why are you so scared all of a sudden?" His mind raced back to that fateful night, the flames licking the sky as his childhood home, and innocents were reduced to ashes. "It's worse than a fire, Sally. We have to go now," he insisted, the memory of his parents' fate igniting his urgency. Stu Redman's story unfolded in fragments like pieces of a puzzle scattered across the chapter. At 9, he was more familiar with labor than play, his hands calloused from unloading trucks rather than holding toys. The loss of his youngest brother to pneumonia was a wound reopened by every hardship, and his mother's passing left him with a legacy of resilience and a brother to protect. Stu's sacrifices were many, including the scholarships and opportunities he forwent, choosing instead the path of a provider at the local calculator factory. In a serene park, Franny Goldsmith clutched her father's hand, the wooden bench beneath them a silent witness to her confession. "Daddy," she whispered, the vibrant flowers and playful laughter of children in the distance a stark contrast to her turmoil. "I'm pregnant." Peter Goldsmith's eyes, wide with surprise, enveloped her in a hug that spoke volumes of reassurance amidst the gentle rustle of leaves and the comforting chirp of birds. "It's going to be okay, Franny. I'm here for you. We'll figure this out together," he soothed, his words a balm to her swirling fears and uncertainties. Meanwhile, a shroud of secrecy enveloped a military base where the air hung heavy with the scent of diesel and the distant hum of machinery. It was an Air Force base, strategically located within the United States, where the incident occurred under the cloak of night. A sudden explosion had rocked the facility, the flames casting an ominous glow against the night sky, hinting at casualties yet to be confirmed. In the aftermath, the military was tight-lipped, with investigations shrouded in as much secrecy as the incident itself. Whispers of sabotage circulated, casting a shadow over the base's morale and prompting immediate policy reviews. At the heart of the chaos, a mysterious blue folder containing classified information had vanished, its contents pivotal to national security. The radio crackled with a voice, authoritative yet unknown, repeating the code word Troy. A signal that would change the course of events to come. As the chapter wove these threads together, the lives of Charlie, Stu, and Franny began to converge, their personal crises a microcosm of the larger threat that loomed over them all. Struggling with the past. Larry Underwood, a young man in his early 20s, sat on the couch in his mother's living room, staring blankly at the TV as he nursed a hangover. The night before had been a blur of partying and reckless spending, leaving him with a throbbing headache and an empty wallet. "Mom, can I stay here for a while?" Larry asked, not looking up from the TV. Alice Underwood, Larry's mother, sighed heavily as she walked into the room. "What's wrong, Larry? You're always welcome here, but you know I'm not made of money." "I know, Mom. I just need to get back on my feet," Larry replied, still avoiding eye contact. Alice sat down beside him, her expression a mix of concern and disappointment. "You're always taking advantage of me, Larry. When are you going to learn to take care of yourself?" Larry shrugged, feeling a pang of guilt. "I don't know, Mom. I just get caught up in the moment sometimes." Alice placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You need to think about your future, Larry. You can't keep living like this. You're almost 25 years old. It's time to grow up." Just then, the doorbell rang. Alice got up to answer it, revealing Wayne, Larry's friend from high school. "Hey, man, what's going on?" Wayne asked, noticing Larry's disheveled state. "Just having a rough morning," Larry replied, rubbing his temples. Wayne nodded sympathetically. You need to get your finances in order, Larry. You can't keep living beyond your means. Let's sit down and go over your budget together. As they sat down at the kitchen table, Larry couldn't help but think about his past mistakes and the people who had been affected by them. Alice entered the kitchen with a tray of sandwiches. I'm glad you're here, Wayne. Larry needs some sense talked into him. I know, Mrs. Underwood, Wayne said, helping himself to a sandwich. We're going to sort this out, Larry. You just need to make some changes. Larry nodded, feeling a weight on his shoulders. He knew they were right, but the thought of confronting his past and taking responsibility for his actions filled him with dread. As the afternoon wore on, Larry's hangover began to lift, but the weight of his struggles remained. He knew he needed to make changes, but taking that first step felt daunting. I'm going for a walk, Larry announced, standing up abruptly. Alice and Wayne exchanged concerned glances as Larry left the house. Returning home, Larry found Alice in the kitchen, baking cookies. The familiar scent of freshly baked treats filled him with a sense of warmth and nostalgia. Cookies? He asked, his voice laced with a mix of hope and hesitation. Alice turned, her eyes softening at the sight of her son. Your favorite. Chocolate chip dee. Larry sat down at the kitchen table, watching as his mother placed a plate of cookies in front of him. It was a simple gesture, but it spoke volumes about their bond. I'm sorry, Mom, he said, his voice thick with emotion. For everything. Alice pulled up a chair and took his hand in hers. I know, honey. We all make mistakes, but we can't change the past. We can only move forward and try to do better. Larry nodded, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. He knew his mother loved him, despite their differences. And in that moment, he felt ready to face his struggles head on. I think it's time for me to get a job, he said, taking a bite of a cookie. Alice smiled, her eyes shining with pride and relief. That's my boy. I know it won't be easy, but I'm here for you every step of the way. As they sat together in the warm glow of the kitchen, Larry felt a sense of hope and determination. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be smooth, but with his mother by his side, he believed he could finally leave his troubled past behind and forge a brighter future. Confronting reality. In the soft glow of the late afternoon sun, Franny Goldsmith sat on the front porch, the aftermath of a thunder shower fresh in the air. Her father, Carl, joined her, his presence a silent question. I've been to the doctor, Franny began, her voice a mix of resolve and vulnerability. There's going to be a baby. Carl's eyes softened, and he reached for her hand, their shared look acknowledging the weight of her unspoken fears. We'll navigate this storm together, Carl assured her, his tone a steady anchor. And Jesse? He inquired gently. Franny's gaze drifted to the rainbow over the water, a symbol of tumultuous times. He's the father, she admitted, but his presence in our future is as uncertain as the shifting clouds. Meanwhile, Stu Redman and Vic Palfrey found themselves in the sterile confines of Atlanta Hospital, a stark contrast to the warmth of Franny's home. The hospital, a cold edifice of fear and surveillance, buzzed with the urgency of a crisis. The Captain Trips virus, a relentless scourge, had cast a shadow over the nation, its rapid mutations outpacing the frantic efforts of the medical community. As Stu was led through the maze of corridors, he couldn't help but recall the base's incident, the first domino in the cascade of chaos. Dr. Jenkins, his face etched with concern, began a thorough examination. We're in uncharted waters, he confessed, but we're not giving up hope. Stu's thoughts were interrupted by an unexpected commotion outside the room. A nurse burst in, her face pale with shock. The virus, it's changing, she stammered. Some patients, they're recovering. Hope flickered in Stu's eyes, a stark contrast to the despair that had gripped him. This could be the turning point they were desperately seeking. Back on the porch, Carl and Franny clung to each other, the rainbow now a distant memory as the sun dipped below the horizon. Whatever comes, Carl whispered, we'll face it as a family. Franny nodded, her resolve hardening. Upstairs, the tablecloth lay forgotten as she prepared to step into an uncertain future, fortified by her father's unwavering support. Desperation and chaos. The air was thick with tension as Stu Redmond paced the sterile hospital room, his mind racing with unanswered questions. Why won't they tell me anything? He muttered, the frustration evident in his voice. The medical staff had been evasive, their eyes avoiding his as they whispered among themselves. In a small, cluttered room, Harold Lauder sat hunched over his diary, the dim light casting shadows over his determined face. He scribbled furiously, driven by a deep sense of insecurity and resentment. They'll see, he wrote. I'll show them all what Harold Lauder is capable of. His journal entry reflected a belief that embracing pride and hate was noble, indicating a desire for personal gain rather than genuine altruism. As he closed his diary, a sinister plan began to form in his mind. It's time, he whispered to the empty room. Time for Harold Lauder to take control. Larry Underwood found himself at a crossroads, the weight of his past bearing down on him. I can't keep running from who I am, he confessed to his reflection in the mirror, the image of a man desperate for redemption staring back at him. Franny Goldsmith stood defiantly, her voice steady as she rejected the proposal that would have tied her down. I need to be free to make my own choices, she declared, her eyes alight with the fire of independence. With a hand on her swelling belly, she turned to face the new world order with determination. We'll build something better, she vowed, for him, she said, thinking of her unborn child. As night fell, Nick Andros played a haunting melody on his harmonica, the vibrations echoing through his soul like a beacon of hope and resilience. Though unable to hear the music he played, it seemed to speak directly to those lost in the darkness. In the shadows of the city, Trash Can Man's thoughts turned to escape. He had had enough of the kid's tyranny and decided that tonight, after the monster had succumbed to sleep, he would slip away. His fears about the Dark Priest were too big to coalesce, but he knew he had to get away from this place. Saying things like that, even if you were joking, was like shitting on the altar of a church or holding your face up to the sky in a thunderstorm and begging the lightning to come hit you. As the characters navigated their individual struggles with desperation and chaos, they each began to sense the invisible threads pulling them towards a shared destiny. Harold, with his diary tucked under his arm, ventured out into the night, his mind teeming with plots and the hunger for recognition that gnawed at his soul. He knew that his actions could tip the scales in a world teetering on the brink of a new era or utter destruction. Franny, her resolve as strong as the life growing inside her, sought out allies, knowing that the future would demand not just strength but unity. Larry, no longer able to flee his own reflection, decided it was time to face his demons, to seek out the truth of his existence in a world where every truth seemed shrouded in shadow. And Nick, his harmonica silent in the stillness of the night, prepared to step forward as a leader, his disability no longer a barrier but a bridge to those who struggled to find their way. The Trash Can Man, his escape a silent rebellion against the chaos he once craved, moved through the darkness, his journey a testament to the power of fear and the possibility of redemption. As the dawn approached, bringing with it the light of a new day, the paths of these disparate souls began to converge, drawn together by the unseen forces of fate and the shared determination to forge a future from the ashes of the past. Darkness descends. The sun had set over the city, casting a dark and ominous shadow over the streets. The once bustling streets were now empty, save for the occasional figure hurrying to find shelter from the impending doom. At WBZ-TV in Boston, a group of 9 individuals, including 3 newscasters and 6 technicians, had hatched a plan to take control of the television station. They were all ill, and with nothing to lose, they decided to make a stand against the government's manipulation of the news. Bob Palmer, the morning news anchor, was handed a script to read about the superflu epidemic. But as he began to read, he realized it was patently false. The group staged a coup during the live broadcast, effectively capturing the television station by disarming the soldiers who were guarding them. "We're not going to read this crap," Bob exclaimed, ripping up the script. "We're taking back control of the news." The station personnel quickly joined the rebellion, locking all the doors on the 6th floor and preventing the soldiers from entering through the fire stairs. As the cameras rolled, Bob addressed the audience, his voice shaking with determination. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have taken control of this television station. We will no longer be silenced by the government's lies. We will bring you the truth, no matter what." Meanwhile, Franny Goldsmith sat anxiously by her mother's bedside in Atlanta. Carla was struggling to breathe, her condition critical due to the superflu. Franny's father, Carl, held her close, trying to comfort her as she begged her mother not to leave her. But as they watched, Carla's condition worsened. The medical staff seemed overwhelmed and understaffed, and Franny's fear turned to anger. "This is ridiculous," she exclaimed. "Why can't they do something to help her?" Carl tried to calm her down, but Franny was beyond consolation. She felt helpless and abandoned by the medical system. In another part of town, Stu Redmond sat isolated in his hospital room, feeling like a prisoner. The medical staff seemed negligent in their care, and Stu was under constant surveillance with armed guards present during routine tests. He wondered what was happening outside, and his resolve to escape and find Franny grew stronger. In the shadows of the city, Harold Lauder walked alone, his mind a whirlwind of dark thoughts. Franny's rejection had cut deep, and his heart had turned to stone. "She'll regret choosing Stu over me," he whispered to the night, his hands clenched in silent fury. As the night wore on, the darkness seemed to closing in. The tension was palpable, and the air was thick with anticipation. Suddenly, the air raid siren wailed in the distance, a haunting reminder of the battle between good and evil that loomed on the horizon. The fate of the world hung in the balance, and in the heart of the darkness, the struggle for light continued. The siren's wail grew louder, piercing the night air and sending a chill down the spines of those who heard it. It was a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at the same time, echoing off the buildings and streets of the city. Franny's grip on her father's hand tightened as she looked up at him, her eyes wide with fear. "What's happening, Dad?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Carl's face was grim, his eyes fixed on some point beyond the hospital room. "I don't know, kiddo," he said, "but I think it's just starting." Destruction and redemption. In the heart of the wasteland, the trash can man, his face smeared with soot, danced around a towering inferno. His laughter, a haunting melody, was carried away by the howling wind as he reveled in the destruction, proclaiming, "Fire is the cleanser." With each piece of debris he hurled into the flames. In a dimly lit barn on the outskirts of Boulder, Harold Lauder's hands were steady, betraying no tremor as he meticulously assembled the intricate components of a bomb. Wires, timers, and explosive compounds were laid out before him, each piece a silent testament to his deadly intent. Nadine Cross stood by, her role more than a mere observer. She was the whisperer of dark encouragement, the echo of Harold's own twisted desires. "Will this bring us the recognition we crave?" she murmured, her voice a blend of fear and anticipation. Harold's response was a determined whisper. "Our actions will speak for us. Flag will have no choice but to see our worth." His focus never wavered from the task at hand, each movement a step closer to their dark aspiration. As Harold worked on his deadly plan, far from the safety of the free zone, Lloyd Henry languished in a prison cell, his hunger pangs a cruel reminder of his plight. The jingle of keys heralded the arrival of a figure that promised liberation. "Lloyd, my good and faithful servant, are you ready to be free?" Randall Flagg's voice was like silk, and his smile promised untold power. Lloyd nodded eagerly, his desperation clear. "Yes, master. I'll do anything." Flagg extended his hand, and as Lloyd took it, he felt a surge of energy. "Then let's begin your transformation," Flagg said, leading Lloyd out of the darkness and into a world where every shadow whispered promises of power. In the community's heart, Stu Redman and Franny Goldsmith worked tirelessly, their hands planting seeds of hope in the barren earth. "We're building something new, Franny," Stu said, wiping the sweat from his brow. "A future." Their efforts were a stark contrast to the hidden machinations of Harold and Nadine, whose plans crept forward like the shadows at dusk. As Harold and Nadine prepared for their moment of reckoning, the community remained oblivious to the impending threat. The bomb's clock ticked away, its rhythm a haunting melody of impending doom. Nadine's eyes, once filled with fear, now burned with a resolute fire, mirroring the inferno that the trash can man had set ablaze in the wasteland. And amidst the turmoil, a voice of reason and unity called out, rallying the community. "We stand together," it declared, "or we fall apart." The phone. Convergence of fates. Stu and Franny convened with the survivors in the makeshift meeting room, united by the common goal of rebuilding their society and facing the threat of Randall Flagg. "Electricity is crucial for our survival," Stu emphasized, signaling the urgency to restore power. Franny concurred, adding, "It's essential to govern ourselves without falling into autocracy." Larry, from the back of the room, suggested prioritizing the search for skilled individuals to rebuild their infrastructure. Ralph, an engineer, and Glenn Bateman, with his economic expertise, volunteered their services. The conversation turned to Harold, who had betrayed their trust. Stu, with a stern look, proposed to address Harold's case later, focusing now on strengthening their community against Flagg's menace. Harold, meanwhile, was found in a ravine, injured from a fall after a failed attempt to harm Nadine. Struggling with pain and the onset of gangrene, he lay there, contemplating his choices and whispering a remorseful apology. Back in the meeting, Larry grappled with his conscience over a difficult decision that had cost lives, including Joe's, who had previously shown signs of distress and conflict. Franny reassured him, acknowledging the necessity of tough choices in their new reality. As the meeting concluded, Stu rallied the community with a call to action. "We have a lot of work ahead of us," he declared, "but we've got the right people for the job. Let's start by making a list of all the skills we have and the tasks that need doing. We can beat this. We can build something great here." The group dispersed, each person lost in thought about the future. They were survivors, and they had hope. Hope for power, for peace, and for a new society where the darkness of Randall Flagg would never reach. The chapter ends with Stu and Franny walking hand in hand, looking at the stars that shone brightly above them. "We'll make it through," Franny said with conviction. "As long as we stick together." Stu squeezed her hand in agreement. "Together," he echoed. And with that, they turned back towards the lights of their growing community, ready to face whatever came next. Uncertain future. The rain pattered against the window as Stu Redman sat, deep in thought, at the kitchen table. Franny Goldsmith joined him, her son Joseph cradled in her arms, and together they watched the dawn break, casting a soft glow over the uncertain world outside. "Stu, do you think we'll ever return to a life without fear? Will we ever feel safe again?" Franny asked, her voice barely above a whisper, reflecting her concerns about raising her child in a world so drastically changed by the superflu and the absence of Mother Abigail's guidance. Stu looked at her, his eyes reflecting the same question. "I don't know, Fran, but we've got to keep trying for him," he said, nodding towards Joseph. Harold Lauder sat alone in his room, the walls adorned with plans and schemes. His heart was a battleground of hate and pride, emotions that had driven him to the brink. In a separate moment, as he looked at a photo of Franny, his unrequited love, a single tear rolled down his cheek. "Why can't they see? I could lead them to greatness," Harold muttered to himself. Meanwhile, Mother Abigail lay in her bed, seeking solace in prayer, hoping for guidance. At the town hall, Nick Andros stood before a gathering of the survivors, his hands signing the words with a calm precision that belied the turmoil within. "We need to decide our future, together," he conveyed, his silent voice resonating in the hearts of those present. The issues at hand were clear: the formation of a permanent committee to lead, the looming threat of Flag, and the practical matters of surviving the winter and resolving the power outages. Ralph, his face a mask of determination, stood beside Nick. "It's time for us to vote, to choose our path," he said, his voice steady and sure. The room, filled with the survivors, buzzed with whispers of agreement, the air thick with the promise of a new beginning. Yet the sudden wail of the air raid siren cut through the murmurs, sending a shiver down everyone's spine. Glenn Batman stepped forward, his eyes alight with a fierce determination. "This is our moment to stand against the darkness," he declared. "Flag will not define us. We are the light in this new world." As the community rallied around Glenn's impassioned speech, they felt the void left by Mother Abigail's absence. Her wisdom and strength had been a beacon, and now they had to navigate without her. Harold, watching from the shadows, felt a pang of longing to be part of something greater. But his pride and hate held him back, chaining him to a destiny of his own making. The chapter closed with the survivors united in purpose, yet each